We continue our series, Amazing Jesus. It's all the times in Mark when the people were amazed at Jesus. They were amazed at his teaching. They were amazed at his power over the supernatural. He cast out a demon in the temple. It wasn't the temple, it was a synagogue. They were amazed at his power over nature. They were amazed at his healing. They were amazed that he even had the power over death itself. Today we're going to back into, because I got these a little out of order, and I did this for a reason, into chapter 5. We're going to go back to the beginning of chapter 5 and look at the account that immediately preceded what we read last Sunday. Very familiar scene on the screen here of the pigs. And so you know what we're going to be talking about. I know that today is Pentecost, and we could do a sermon on that, but we have done that in recent years, and I'll plan to do that next year, Lord willing. And I also know that this is Memorial Day weekend, and I could preach a sermon honoring our veterans. But I choose to continue with this series that we're doing, and so that's what we're going to do. Mark 5, if you can, please stand. I'm going to read down through 20. They had just gone across the lake, and he walked on the water, and Peter walked on the water, and he made the storm stop, and they were amazed at his power over nature. And now we come to chapter 5. So they arrived on the other side of the lake in the region of the Gerasenes. And when Jesus climbed out of the boat, a man possessed by an evil spirit came out from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the burial caves and could no longer be restrained, even with a chain. Whenever he was put into chains and shackles, as he often was, he snapped the chains from his wrist and smashed the shackles. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Day and night he wandered among the burial caves and in the hills, howling and cutting himself with sharp stones. When Jesus was still some distance away, the man saw him, ran to meet him, and bowed low before him. You see the worship there? With a shriek, he screamed, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In the name of God, I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had already said to the spirit, "Come out of the man, you evil spirit, come out of him." Then Jesus demanded, "What is your name?" And he replied, "My name is Legion, because there are many of us inside this man." And then the evil spirits begged him again and again not to send them to some distant place. Now there I need to tell you, Luke says into the abyss or into the pit. Mark says distant place. There happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside nearby. "Send us into those pigs," the spirits begged. "Let us enter them." So Jesus gave them permission. The evil spirits came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the entire herd of about 2,000 pigs plunged down the steep hillside into the lake and drowned in the water. The herdsmen fled to a nearby town and the surrounding countryside, spreading the news as they ran. People rushed out to see what had happened. A crowd soon gathered around Jesus, and they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons. He was sitting there fully clothed and perfectly sane, and they were all afraid. Then those who had seen what happened told the others about the demon-possessed man and the pigs. And the crowd began pleading with Jesus to go away and leave them alone. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed, begged, notice all the begging, begged to go with him. But Jesus said no. I've told y'all before, Jesus will say no sometimes, okay? Jesus said no. Go home to your family and tell them everything the Lord has done for you and how merciful he has been. So the man started off to visit the 10 towns. That might say Decapolis in your, that's the 10 towns of that region, and began to proclaim the great things Jesus had done for him. All right, here it is, everybody. And everyone was amazed at what he told them. There's our word, amazed. Okay, you may be seated. God's people said? Amen. All right, so I want to talk about the back of the story first, because I want to make sure I have time to say what I want to say about them being amazed at this man's testimony. Now, up until today, our series has talked about how people were amazed at Jesus and what he did and his power. Today, the people are amazed at his testimony. Now, if we continue reading into Mark, and we come to the next chapter, Mark 7, go ahead and put that up for us there, Billy. Right at the end of 7, it says that Jesus left Tyre and went up to Sidon before going back to the Sea of Galilee and the region of the 10 towns. Okay, that's the key. You see that? Decapolis, the 10 towns. Where did Jesus tell the man to go? Into the 10 towns, okay? And so Jesus goes to the 10 towns. A deaf man with a speech impediment was brought to him, and the people begged Jesus to lay his hands on the man and to heal him. And then look down at the bottom, verse 37. They were completely amazed. There it is. And said again and again, this time they're amazed at Jesus. Everything he does is wonderful. He makes the deaf to hear and gives speech to those who cannot speak. Now, how did they know? How did they know that Jesus could heal this man that they brought to Jesus? Because the demon-possessed man, the demoniac, we don't know his name, the rude dude in the crude mood, right? We don't know the dude. We don't know his name. He went into the towns as the first missionary. Now, this is before Jesus sends out the 70, and it's before Jesus sends out the 12. This was actually the very first missionary that Jesus sent out. And it's in Gentile territory. This is east of the Jordan. Bashan, yes, from this morning. Yes, Bashan. That's right. So comes Sunday school, it all ties together. So that's the area. It's the 10 cities. It's Decapolis. And this man became a missionary. And his testimony was very simple. I was possessed by evil spirits. I was a horrible creature. I was miserable. I was cutting myself. You know, we see that to this very day. That's a demonic thing. That's what they want you to do, is to destroy yourself. And he was cutting himself. This guy was scary. I mean, is either the play or the chosen shows how scared the disciples were when Jesus approaches this guy. If you got close to him, he would kill you. And ladies, he would rape you first. It says he was naked. That's kind of a euphemism. He was a pervert. And he was bad news. Well, had 6,000 demons living inside of him. And I think we're seeing that today. I think, watch the news. It's interesting. In Genesis 6, we know about the angelic beings that mate women and create the Nephilim. And then there's no other demon possession in the Old Testament. But then we come to Jesus, and there's this humongous cluster of demon activity and demonic activity, and Jesus casting out demons. It's very interesting. And then as Acts is tapering off into Paul's story, and we don't see any demon possession after that until we get to Ephesians 6, and Paul says our battles is not against flesh and blood, but it's against the principalities, the rulers We know demonic activity is still here, but you could expect when God comes to earth that the demons recognized him, and we've discussed this. There's a supernatural layer, and Jesus exposed it, and so that's why we see so much demonic activity during his ministry. And so they were allowing this man. He's perfectly sane. He's not. He probably cut his hair and his beard, and he's looking good. He's got his clothes on. He's perfectly normal, and he goes and he's telling everybody his story, and they were amazed. But if you don't hear anything else this morning, please hear this. Every one of you in this room has an amazing testimony. And that's what we're keying in on today, is this guy's testimony. It's amazing. There's even sound going off, and in celebration of how amazing your there should be some fireworks even, going off. I know it. I can see your eyes. I can see what you're all thinking. You're thinking, well, my testimony's not like this guy's. My testimony's not that exciting. I want to tell you that it is. Back when I was a youth minister, Jeff, Mary Lee, y'all remember, we would practice sharing our testimonies with each other. And you want to get your testimony down to 2 minutes or less. They call that an elevator pitch. And you know why, right? Because you're making a pitch on the elevator going up, right? So you want to make it an elevator pitch because you don't have much time to share it. But I want you all to know that you all have a testimony. Your testimony is what your life was like before you were saved, how you were saved, and what Jesus has done in your life since you've been saved. And we all, as you're just kind of plodding along day by day in your life, you may not realize the enormity of what God is doing in your life at this very moment. But he's doing things, he's working behind the scenes. He's lining things up. He's got you right where you are, right in this very room. He has blessed your crooked road, and he's brought you here, and you all have a testimony. We all have something to share. For me, I was saved early. I was 7. I came from an extremely stable family, and we went to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Judy, we even went on Wednesday night when it was business meeting. Judy was telling us a story about, it was Wednesday night and it was business meeting. She said, "Come on, Mom," talking to my grandmom. She said, "Come on, Mom, I don't want to go to a business meeting." She stayed home. Anyway, you have to ask her what happens. But it has to do with making popcorn balls. I'll just tell you that. But you all have a testimony. And our testimony is not to brag about how bad we were. I remember one time the youth were kind of sharing their testimonies, and I told one guy, I said, "Man, you're not bragging on God, you're bragging on yourself here, what you did." But we have a story. Every individual has a story about miracles that have happened in our lives. Things that weren't supposed to happen that did. Things when God intervened. Things that we couldn't quit and God enabled us to. Things that in our families that didn't seem to have any way out. But God made a way when there was no way. So that we all have that testimony, and we all have victories and defeats. And we all have a story to tell. Your life is a story to tell. So I want you I want you to know that you have an amazing testimony because God has worked in your life and he has saved you in the miracle of salvation. I'm taking that less and less for granted, I think, the older I get. Just the miracle of him saving me. And so that's the end of our account today, the end of our story. And I wanted to make sure I said that first while you were all still awake and listening and were paying attention, because I want to make sure you get that. You know, we've been talking about the amazing things that Jesus did. Remember, Jesus said, you'll do even more amazing things than these. Because we just don't know how God may use us and the things that God will do and the miracles that we'll see in our lives. And so I want you to maybe write out your testimony, and you should be able to, you know, like read it to somebody, a friend or husband or spouse. And maybe, you know, get it down 2 minutes or less. And make sure you're bragging on God and not just on yourself. But we all have a testimony. We have a testimony to share. And the people were amazed at this man's testimony, and of course they were. Now let's go back to the beginning of the chapter and just kind of walk through this. Jesus is doing amazing things, feeding 20,000 people with the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. That's amazing. And then calming the storm after he walked on the water, and he actually gave Peter the power to walk on that same water that same night. And then John tells us that the boat just was at the shore. What's the word in Star Trek? Beam me up. What do you call it? Transported. Thank you. There's so much happening in this little short period of time. Because John tells us that boat was transported to the shore. Now, he said, let's get in the boat and go over to Bethsaida, but they didn't. They went to the region of the Gerasenes. Now, some versions of the Bible, your Bible might actually say the Gabardines there. Is that what yours says? Gabara was a bigger town. Gerasa was a smaller village closer by. And so both was accurate. It's kind of like saying, where are you from? Well, I'm from Palestine, but actually you're from Elkhart, right? Right. So, but you'd say, where are you from? Oh, I'm from Palestine. It's the same idea. So I think Matthew and Mark say one, and Luke says the. I hadn't looked all that, but anyway, that's why yours may say something different. But you can actually go to this area today. It's over on the east side of the Sea of Galilee. This morning we studied it as Bashan. And they go over there. This is a Gentile area. It's during the Roman world. It's Greek influence. And so they have the Greek gods. This was very pagan. Now, what's our first clue that this is not Jewish territory? That they're pig farmers. A lot of scholars think that this may have been a community pig operation and not just one person, because there was 2,000 pigs. That's a lot of pigs. And so this may have been a whole community of pigs. You know, they brand them or whatever. So when Jesus arrives, the man runs out and falls at his feet. The man's basically not controlling his body. These demons are. And they're saying, what do you want to do with us, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Notice they knew exactly who he was. And they begged him. I mean, this whole thing is them begging him, don't send us away. Don't send us to the pit. Or even if what Mark says here is closer to what they said, don't send us to some distant place. I think that they did say into the pit or into the abyss. I think Luke actually has these secondary details in the Gospels are good because they remind us that they weren't synchronized later. these are individual authors. Remember, I've told you if there's a car wreck out here, we'd all have a different account, of exactly what was said or what we saw. And so, remember there was that dress that was on the internet a couple of years back. Some people saw it as yellow and black, and some people saw it as blue. Remember that? It's weird. And I saw it as one thing. Jody saw it as another, I think. We're like, what? So we see things different. Anyway, they are begging him not to send them away. And they see the pigs over on the hillside. And they say, to this very day, you can see a hillside that's like this. And it's near tombs. When we think of he lived among the tombs, we think of tombstones because we're western in Texas. The tombs were caves where they would bury people. So that would provide shelter for him too. By the way, Matthew says there was 2 of them. But Mark and Luke are just emphasizing the one. If there was 2, there was certainly one, and so it's just one of those little secondary things that lets us know that these were written by individuals, and the whole Bible wasn't written by somebody sitting down writing it. And so we know that we have accurate autographs. And so this guy runs out, falls at Jesus' feet. What do you want to do with us? And when Jesus says, "What's your name?" he's speaking to the demon. The demon, I guess, had a spokesman. And he says, "We're legion, for we are many." Now, y'all know that a legion in the Roman army was between 4,000 and 6,000. And so this guy was eat up with demons. He lived in a pagan society with idols, uncleanness all around. The pigs are kind of symbolic of that. Because God had declared them unclean for at least for the Jews in their society. And so he's living in a pagan society, and this place is eaten up with demons, and this poor guy's got 4,000 to 6,000 of them in him. And that's why he was so bad and why he's so strong. He could break chains. So he had a supernatural strength that they were giving him. And they used his vocal cords. They didn't want to leave a body. It seems as though demons like to be in a body. They like to have a body, a place to live, and then they can control the body. They're parasites. That's all they are. And they need a host. Jesus, I think it's in Luke 7, talks about the man who kicks the demon out. And then he sweeps his heart clean. The demon is out in arid places and can't find rest. He's restless because he needs a body to live in. There's symbolism there of Jesus telling us to come to him for rest, right? These demons couldn't find it. And so the demon comes back to the man who had kicked it out and finds his heart empty, and he comes back and brings 7 more with him. Jesus tells that story. And so apparently demons need a space. They need a body. They need a host. And they were making this man, or these men, if it were 2, they're making them be a terror in this area, and the people couldn't even go out there. They couldn't go anywhere near him. And I guess the townsmen would bring chains out to try to chain this, because he's hurting people. He's a murderer. So they bring chains out and they chain him, and he just break the chains. And he's trying to hurt himself. He can't even succeed at that. You could think about the different layers of this all day. But they see the pigs over there, and they say, "Let us go into those pigs." Now, let me just say this, and I've said this before. How bad is hell that you'd rather live in a pig than go there? That's what that tells you. See, he had the right and the authority to send them immediately to hell, to send them to the pit, to the abyss. And they were begging him not to do that. And in fact, what they came up to him is like, why are you here so early? It's not time to send us to the pit. It's not time. Don't send us there early. And they wanted a host. And they saw these pigs and they said, just let us live in those pigs. Now, the second major question in this account is, why would Jesus allow them to go into the pigs, knowing that what's going to happen? And I think it's to show the enormity of this problem. You know, we just kind of read the Bible. Oh, you know, he had 6,000 demons in him, and Jesus kicked them out. And guys, by sending them into a whole herd of 2,000 pigs, he's showing how big of a deal this was. So he let them. He said, okay. And they went into the pigs. Now, they didn't do one thing without his permission. They can't do anything without God's permission. He could have gone ahead and just sent them to the abyss. And in fact, when he was here, why didn't he just send every single demon into the abyss? Because it's not time yet. They still have jobs to do. They're still working. They're working against God, but God is using all of this. And so he allowed it. He said, go. And so they went into the pigs. Now, I think he double-crossed them, because I think when the pigs died, I think he probably just thought it and sent them into the abyss. I can't say that. I'm just kind of thinking about it, because I've had a whole week to think about this. Hey?
Water again, too.
Yeah, water. He had just calmed that water. Water is symbolic of chaos. And he sends them back into the chaos. He sends them back into the water. Yeah, there's lots you can do with this. Lots of symbolism here and lots of things that are happening here. So he allows it. He let them go into the pigs. So our first question is, how bad is hell that you'd rather live in a pig? And our second question is, how bad is being demon-possessed that you'd rather kill yourself? You see that? As soon as they got into those pigs said, nuh-uh. Ran down that hill and drowned. Suicide, I know, yeah. And so that's the biblical term for it. Okay, so they died. Deviled ham. So it was horrible. It'd be horrible to go to hell, and we should be scared of hell. We should make sure everybody hears about Jesus and his story. And that's where our testimony comes in. Man, that guy was suffering. He was suffering because he was trying to kill himself too. Basically, God just wasn't allowing it. He's trying to cut himself and kill himself. And those pigs, they immediately killed themselves when this happened. Jesus said that, Satan's come to kill, steal, and destroy. And that's just true. We just see it. And we see the enormity of this possession. We just saw the enormity of him feeding 20,000 people. And the enormity of him walking on the water and calming the sea. And now we see the enormity of how awful demon possession is. So we Christians can't be demon possessed. We can be oppressed. We can't be possessed. Because we got a no vacancy sign on our heart. We've got Jesus there. The point of Jesus telling the parable of the guy who kicks out the demon, he comes back, he brings 7 more, remember, he swept his heart clean. The point of that is you weren't created to have a clean but empty heart. You're designed to have God in your heart, have Jesus in your heart. So, and once Jesus saved this fella and makes him a missionary, he's telling everybody, look, I got Jesus in there now, and those demons can't come anywhere near me. So all of these pigs committed suicide and went into the water. And, and I've always thought, man, he ruined the economy of that whole area for this one man. And would Jesus do that? What's more important, one man or an area's economy? One person, one soul is worth 2,000 sheep. I mean, pigs too. Sheep, pigs, whatever, cows. Because one soul is worth more. And so there is that story. But you know what? He didn't necessarily wreck their economy. They just kind of had to get to work. They had 2,000 dead pigs, and it was time to get to slaughtering. You know, those pigs were about to get their throat cut anyway. He just drowned them instead. Probably more humane than what was about to happen to them. But the whole town had to start pulling pigs out of the... You know, I hope they had some salt, right, Mark? Had some salt pork, yeah. Maybe they had a Walmart truck parked nearby, and they start loading them up, right? So he didn't ruin their economy. He just put them to work. Ruin the sheep business? Oh, they went to the sheep business. Well, maybe they did. You know, is this a little bit of a slam against them for raising pigs because Jesus told the Jews not to eat pork? Yeah, I don't really think so. This just kind of shows us that this is a pagan area. It's a non-Jewish area. And this guy was a Gentile. Isn't that interesting? The very first missionary is a Gentile. And so he allows the demons to go on the pigs. The pigs commit suicide. The townsfolk had to come together and make salt pork. That's just what they had to do. But isn't it interesting that the townspeople asked Jesus to leave because they were afraid of his power? They knew that he was a righteous man. You think they would have been celebrating. You think they'd have thrown a parade and a party over this guy that was so miserable and was so dangerous, and now all of a sudden he's great, he's fine. No, they're not celebrating over him. They're just asking Jesus to get out of there because it's kind of the way we react to righteousness, isn't it? You know, hey, look, kind of better the devil you know, right? This Jesus guy, he's coming in here and he's calling for righteousness. And so they asked Jesus to leave, and he did. Got back in the boat, went back home. And he came back later. It may have been a year later. He let the guy's testimony get out. The word spread, and then he comes back, and they were amazed at what he could do. All right. Amen. God bless.